Mounting pressure from the United States on Pakistan to go after the Haqqani network has left many wondering what is about to happen next between the two countries. And part of that concern arises from the fact that this time both Pakistan and United States are not mincing any words. Both are engaged in the harshest war of words since Pakistan joined the US war on terror following the September 11, 2001 attacks on the United States. For example, when Admiral Mike Mullen says that Haqqani network acts as a veritable arm of the ISI, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Hina Rabbani Kar asserts that Haqqani network was the blue-eyed boy of the CIA. And now that political settlement to end the Afghan war is awaited, chief government negotiator with the Taliban, Burhanuddin Rabbani, is no longer in this world. So tonight on the platform, we will examine if hope for reconciliation with Taliban is still there, and if this recent tension between Pakistan and United States would result in something that the entire region and the rest of the world could benefit from. To take part in the conversation today, I have a panel of two distinguished guests. Colonel retired Khalid Munir, he's a defense analyst. Welcome, Colonel Munir, here to the platform tonight. And next to him is ABM Air Vice Marshal retired, Mr. Shahzad Chaudhry. He's also former ambassador of Pakistan to Sri Lanka. Welcome, Mr. Chaudhry, tonight to the platform. Let's cross over now live to Washington, D.C. studios of Voice of America, where my colleague from there, Raza Naqvi, is present with his guest. Hello, Raza.
Hello, Waqas, and welcome viewers to Voice of America's Washington studios. I'm Raza Naqvi. Some have called this the lowest ebb in US-Pak relations since the May 2nd American operation to kill Osama bin Laden. The question many are asking now is which side will blink first. To discuss this tonight, we're joined by Sadannand Dhume, a South Asia expert at the American Enterprise Institute, and joining us from New York is Michael Cohen, a senior fellow at the American Security Project. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Mr. Dhume, let me begin with you and get to this question of Admiral Mullen's actual statements and what he actually said. Very quickly, to remind our viewers of what he said the Haqqani network acts as a veritable arm of Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence Agency. With ISI support, Haqqani operatives planned and conducted that truck bomb attack as well as the assault on our embassy. This was the basic accusations it was contained in this quote. Do you believe him?
Yes, in a nutshell. I think there's sort of two things to look at over here. One, what is being said, but equally important, who is saying it. Now, Admiral Mike Mullen is very well known as perhaps Pakistan's best friend in the Obama administration. By some accounts, he's met General Kayani upwards of 30 times. So this is not a person who uses his words loosely. This is not a person who is seen to have any kind of axe to grind against Pakistan. Quite the contrary. He was sort of seen as a great friend of Pakistan and a sort of friend of the relationship. So when someone of his stature and his record says what he says, I think it makes sense to sit up and take notice.
Michael Cohen, I want to ask you the same question. Do you believe what Admiral Mullen said, or do you agree with the accusations that he's leveled against Pakistan?
Well, I think what Admiral Mullen said is what everyone sort of knows, which is that that the U.S. and Pakistan are engaged to some extent in a low-level proxy war in Afghanistan, and that the ISI has been supporting various elements of Taliban insurgency for several years now. I think what was interesting is that Mullen finally came out and said it. What Mullen and U.S. officials have been saying in private for years now, they said in public. And they've ratcheted up the pressure on Pakistan by doing so. My question, I guess, and I hope we talk about a little bit of this in the show, is what happens next? And I think that, in a sense, the U.S. has been trying to use carrots to get the Pakistanis to play along on Afghanistan, or to help U.S. policy in Afghanistan. It hasn't worked. Now we're trying sticks. I'm dubious this is going to work any better than it has in the past, especially because our leverage with Pakistan is decreasing on an almost daily basis as closer we get to what everyone views will be our departure from Afghanistan.
That's an interesting point. We'll get to this question of what will happen next and whether or not Admiral Mullen's statements will work for the United States. I want to go straight over to Islamabad and get Air Vice Marshal Chaudhry into the conversation as well. So, do you think that what Admiral Mullen said is true, or those allegations, do you think they can be substantiated?
Well, I think there's a lot more to what is being exchanged between Admiral Mullen and
Pakistani military. General Kiani, the Pakistani military chief, army chief, has of course come up and said that this is absolutely nonsense. I mean, there is no such support, active support in terms of enabling the Haqqani network to go attack American troops and or American installations in Afghanistan. So that part of it is quite clear. Now the other fact is that why would it take 30 meetings between Admiral Mullen and General Kiani for Admiral Mullen to reach the conclusion that Pakistani ISI or the military is doing something which is not right? Thirdly, the drone strikes have been very actively pursued since 2007 and much more so since 2008. Why is it that within North Waziristan, a much larger percentage, if Haqqani network was such a pain, could not be actually targeted against the Haqqani network? Why did it go to a lot of it to Hafiz Gul Bahadur and Mullah Nazir? So those are the kind of issues that actually are leaving a lot of gap into what is being exchanged on both sides. I think the CIA, the ISI, the American military, the Pakistani military have had contacts with the Haqqani network for a long time, and based upon what each need was, the sort of those relationships then defined the effort to meet those needs. So I think those are the areas that we need to perhaps also look at when you begin to sort of point fingers at the Pakistani military or the Pakistani ISI. And then lastly, Pakistan is in no state at this point of time, because of its economy, because of its factions in the society and other reasons, that Pakistan should initiate as big a trouble for itself just at the point of time when the United States or the Afghan situation is going to be controlled or handled and get to some sort of a completion. So I think those are huge questions that stand out in our mind here, and I feel that perhaps people in Washington and within the US also should reflect on those.
Right, and Colonel Khalid Munir, to bring you into the conversation, why is there so much concern in Pakistan after these statements that have been made by Admiral Mike Mullen? Remember, intelligence officials reportedly are to meet in Islamabad later in the day. Then General Kiani, the army chief, has cancelled his visit to Britain. Also, the Prime Minister Gilani has convened an all-parties conference on September 29. So why so much of reaction? What's the cause of so much concern?
Because of the statements. The statements were direct, very abrupt for the first time. America and Pakistan seem to be in confrontation with each other. Since 1950s, we had been allies, and for the first time, now we are seen to be as confronting each other. On the issue of Haqqani network, we have been blamed, ISI have been blamed by none other than less than Admiral Mullen. What is Haqqani? I must tell my American friends that Haqqani is not a Pashtun tribe. These Haqqanis are students, are those who passed out from a madrasa in Akoda Khatak, Darul Ulum al-Haqqaniya. So those students who pass out from there, they use this word Haqqani with themselves. They are doctors, they are good citizens of, they are good in the, say, the lawyers also, everywhere in the part of the community, everywhere. Some of them became mujahids in the Soviet war, and they were known as Haqqanis because they were being led by Jalaluddin Haqqani. So Haqqani is not a tribe, Haqqani is not a sub-tribe of any Pashtun. Why we reacted so much about this? Because the statements were blunt. We were straight away pointed out that ISI is blaming, doing all this. Actually, the background, if you allow me, for the last 2 months, the August and September's events, America didn't expect this. America was on the paper, it has planned that there will be peace negotiations and there will be peaceful withdrawal, which was unlikely till the time you inducted all the Talibans into it. I went to Kabul with a Senate delegation in March. I was not officially part of delegation, but as a FATA specialist, I was taken over there. So my interest was to, when peace council meetings were being held, I was watching people, and there was a very clear divide between the Pashtuns and non-Pashtuns. The members of the councils who are Pashtuns, they talked to us that this is nothing but a forum to suppress Pashtuns. Now, if the rift was inside, Rabbani itself was himself was a compromise candidate because he was coming from a minority Tajik community, but because he was the president, so he was accepted. Today, you see the statement of the former Northern Alliance. They speak. There were people who were against Taliban, against talking to Taliban. The attacks on embassy, attack and the 20-hour hold off in Kabul. America didn't expect this.
All right. So they came as a surprise. Before I go to Washington, D.C., Mr. Chaudhry, I want to ask you, many of us here in Pakistan are also left shocked and surprised that why would Pakistan get involved in such kind of activities, harming its own ally that it has supported for the last 10 years for, and for that alliance it has given up its own lives. Why would at this point of time when it's crucial, the end game in Afghanistan has begun, would Pakistan get involved in such kind of attacks, such as the attack on the Intercontinental and the recent attack on US Embassy in Kabul?
On a lighter note, there's also a feeling within Pakistan that Admiral Mullen, who's supposed to retire perhaps at the end of the month, has had to answer some difficult questions from the senators in his hearing, and so therefore within that he may have been frustrated with the fact that he was hoping that by the time he leaves the military operation would have reached some sort of a success. It hasn't. I think there's a great amount of reflection needed within Washington and within the US military as to why a 10-year long period in Afghanistan could not deliver what it was meant to. Now there are various reasons and I don't think we need to get into those, but I think that's something that perhaps frustrates the American sensitivities considerably. That is one. Second, you see, as far as Pakistan is concerned, why would Pakistan get into any of these kind of things? Really, we're looking forward to peace actually being brought into Afghanistan. We're looking at a possibility that this peace would then perhaps flow into Pakistan.
Right.
And so therefore this sort of an interdependence of peace
right.
is an area that
right.
Pakistan would very much like to pursue rather than creating further difficulties.
All right, but this time the kind of statements that are coming has really...
That's been rather shocking, rather shocking. And I mean, allies don't talk like this.
And I want to ask this question, Raza, if I could, to Mr. Sadannand Dhume. Many are wondering here, and if you could help us out in that, what kind of options could the US administration be looking at right now to tackle this issue of the Haqqani network? Because the general public here in Pakistan is looking at these statements that are being made as threats of invasion.
Waqas, I'll get to that very quickly. In a nutshell, I don't think anyone has made any threat of invasion. But I'd like to sort of very respectfully disagree with my two colleagues in the studio in Pakistan. I mean, there are two ways of looking at this. One way is, as they implied, that, well, Pakistan has no other interest. Pakistan is only seeking peace. This is completely illogical from a Pakistani point of view, and so on. I take that's a point well taken. That is one point of view. But there is another point of view, which is that elements in Pakistan's security services, elements within the ISI, have never given up the old idea of strategic depth in Afghanistan, have a very strong interest in making sure that the US leaves and that their proxies, the Haqqani network, are in the driver's seat. In some circles, even have a sense that Pakistan's old idea of reaching out all the way to Central Asia is still alive. Now, I'm not saying that is your view. I'm not saying that is everybody's view. That may well be just a minority view, but I don't think we can dismiss it, and I don't think we can have a serious discussion about this if we're simply talking past each other. Just as it's sort of good for people in Washington to try and understand what the argument is in Pakistan, I think it's useful for people in Pakistan to try and understand how this looks from here in Washington, and not simply dismiss that as frustration or some other kind of pop psychology.
I want to ask this question of Mr. Cohen. Mr. Cohen,
Mr. Chaudhry, Raza, we just want a reaction from...
Raza,
sure.
Could I just continue that point?
Go ahead, Mr. Chaudhry.
In Washington. But the point that I want to make is Haqqani is about, as you say, is about 10 to 15,000, perhaps 20,000 number of people. That's the kind of strength that he has. What we are trying to do in Afghanistan, what the US is trying to do in Afghanistan, is to build about 240,000 soldiers and 160,000 police. That would make about 400,000 people, perhaps by 2014. Even now, with 150,000 US military troops, and of course a number of Afghan National Army people there, and of course then the control that the US has over Afghanistan, I wonder what could these 10 or 15,000 people create in terms of strategic depth.